Okay. So, dear friends, you have met Masea Evans before. He has been in our congregation for interfaith programs. We've done spoken word poetry slam with our teens a couple of years ago, and we've continued to foster the strength of our community with interfaith programming. But not only that, is that Dr. Masea Evans, who just received his doctorate in ministry, is a very dear friend of mine. He is a brother. And when things have happened in the Jewish community, I've received calls from Masea. And when I've been troubled, I have turned to Masea a number of times. And so after this insane, tragic event that's happened in our country, actually in our world, which is the tip of an iceberg, I reached out to Masea, my friend, and to just talk with him about that. So Masea, my dear friend, we've talked a little bit about how the pandemic and the explosiveness of that, and then this occurring, and then the violence. And I guess I just want to reach out as ways that we as an interfaith community can take a stand. It's not just a platitude and our prayers are with you, but rather what are some ways that we can really show that we are there seriously?
Yeah. I'm thinking about, well, first of all, thank you for having me, and thank you for extending this invitation. You've said it, we're not only friends, but I do consider you my sister. Obviously, you're my sister in the cloth, but you're just my sister in life. We're navigating through this human experience together, and I'm so happy that God found it fit for our paths to cross in such a way. This last week and a half or so has been really hard on multiple levels. Even as I said, we're sisters within the journey of our humanity. There's times in our life where our own sense of humanity becomes very clear. And one of those is when you deal with death and grief. And I think when I saw those images and when I saw that video, and I saw the life of George Floyd taken, I was confronted with this notion of not only not being safe as a Black man, not only dealing with the fact that he looked a lot like my brother, my cousins, my uncles. Not only was I dealing with the fact that this man, not only had his life taken away from him, and now you have, a daughter who won't have a father, and a son who won't have a father, and I'm also dealing with the fact that I am one traffic stop away from that possibly being me, and me being taken away from my wife Kawami and my daughter Niara. So I'm dealing with these feelings of vulnerability and then just deep grief. Grief not just about the situation, but a generational grief around a structural system that has been set up in such a way that we've been dehumanized and have always been treated as second class. And so all of that comes upon you as you watch the 9 minutes. All of that comes upon you as you see the officer's knee upon Mr. Floyd's neck. And it becomes this living metaphor of the Black experience in a way. And so it's heavy, right? And so that human experience of grief was palpable. And, I know one of the first things that I did that evening was I called a few of my friends, especially some of my Black male friends, and just said, hey, I love you. I'm thinking of you. I just want you to know that. So, you have that moment, and then you have these later moments of the protest, And then later, you know, the fires and the looting and all this stuff, this scrum that has happened, this literal conflagration of events that are happening in this country. And one of the things that I just realized is that as I was talking about this and talking about the politics of it and talking about our, you know, federal leadership and all these different things, is that I remember that I'm still grieving because there's a human element at the center of all of this. There's a life, and there's our lives, and that's where I'm landing with that. I'm still in that place of dealing with this on a human level. So.
I hear you. I hear you. I think that when you are a person who is grieving,
Yeah.
and you're grieving as a Black man, and you're grieving as an American, that we have this a country that has tolerated this kind of revolting sin.
Yeah.
With the looting, which is so not the point.
Yeah.
But given that our economy has been frozen, given that everybody, that's a reality, right? Mm-hmm. But those who are doing that kind of looting are not part of the group people whose hearts are grieving and are so sick of this.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to ask you to also step outside if there's just a second of your grief and help me with how do we stay on point. And maybe that is the essence. You're telling me the truth that you're grieving, and that is the point.
Well, the grief allows you to enter into the human experience. I think before we talk about the economy and all these other things, you have to center human life. And so what happened here? A man died. A man was
murdered.
Yeah, he was murdered. He was murdered, right. That means something. And I think in such a fast-paced society where we're so quick to scroll to the next thing and move on to the next thing, I think it's important as people of faith to stop and pause and allow that to have gravity. That this person's life matters. This situation was unjust, right? And as people of faith, it's important not to get, you know, persuaded to move into all these other conversations, because that can go either way. There's a lot of ideologies, there's a lot of, you know, different beliefs politically about this or that. But one thing that should unite us is that life matters and that justice matters. All of our great traditions are centered in this sense of loving God and loving neighbor, seeing ourselves in each other, being accountable to each other, seeing ourselves as part of the human family. When this person grieves, I grieve. If this person's being mistreated, I am being mistreated. I need to create space of justice for other people, and that is also enhancing me. Like, all of these things happen, but they get lost when we do not center the fact, this one central fact, that this is a person and a life. And a life that is contextualized within a larger system of injustice that needs to be confronted. And because oftentimes people have not heard the cries of people who have been fighting injustice, sometimes that cry looks like something that is violent, that is unfortunate. I think Dr. King in the late 60s, when talking about the riots that ravaged the cities of the North during 65 and 67 and 68, said something to the effect that riots are the language of the unheard. And so I think before those of a certain mind start pointing fingers at, you know, what is happening out there, which is terrible, I think we should also allow ourselves to say, what are we missing? What aspect about the lives of the people who are operating in such a way have been hidden or invisible to us? And that type of introspection, I think, is required of all people of faith. So,
yeah, I also feel, Masea, that when we say Black Lives Matter, we have to say Black Lives Matter instead of diluting to all lives matter.
yeah,
Because if we can call it and claim it as Black Lives Matter, then all our lives matter.
yes, you have said it.
And so, yeah.
I think what happens is the reality of the Black experience is tough to be able to look at ourselves and the systems that we created. So out of comfort, we try to universalize things.
Sure.
Because if we bring attention to the particularity, then we'll see that we are all kind of in this system of white supremacy, right? That we have to be accountable and responsible to dismantling.
Right.
We can't claim innocence as if, well, it's not me, it's not us. All of us are affected by this.
Right.
And so all of us have the responsibility to creating a world that reflects God's best. And making that claim that Black Lives Matter allows us to hone into the particularity of the Black experience where we can see that. A defense mechanism is to zone out, to go 30,000 feet
right.
and say, well, yeah, all lives matter. Well, of course all lives matter. I mean, we know that, we read that. But in particular, where does the claim that Black Lives Matter lead us into? And it's my hope that, congregations and people of faith will not only make that claim, but to surround their communities with the resources to do that sometimes hard work of looking at the reality of race in our society and not seeing it as some cultural diversity play or some sociological thing, but to see it as a thing of faith. Yeah. Because when we talk about people's lives matter, when we talk about being born in the image of God, when we talk about creating a world that is just, those are not just platitudes. Those are things that push us to a horizon of a new reality. It's a thing that makes faith faith. Right. And it's a thing that when we begin to grieve, when we begin to lose hope, when we begin to feel despondent, it's that faith, it's that pushing towards a reality that infuses us with the vitality and the energy and the grace to keep pushing on. And not just for our generation, but for the generations to come. Yeah.
Well, Masea, in Judaism, we say Zichrono Livracha, and I will say Zichrono Livracha, George Floyd. May the memory of George Floyd be a blessing. Mm. And may his death become that which we can each feel in a way that none of us have ever felt before as a country. And may the severity and the truth of that lead us to some change.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you. God bless you.
Are we done?
We're done.
Oh, no. We're going to have to talk offline now.
Okay.
All right. Love you, sister.
I love you too. Bye-bye.